Hello everybody out there. I'm going to talk about Saturn through the houses and through the natal chart. And I will start with slide 1. So this is a piece by Alice Bailey, which I love her work. I've read quite a few of her books. And she mentions that when the disciple knows Saturn as God, the God who offers opportunity and does not only feel him to be deity who brings disaster, then he is on the path of discipleship in truth and is indeed and not just theoretically. And she was born in Manchester in 1880 and died in New York in 1949. And I like this picture. This is that goes with it that I found on Wikipedia. Beautiful picture to me that represents the beauty and the beast, so to speak. For me. Next slide, thank you. So this is from Liz Green and a book that I read on Saturn, which fascinated me as I dig into understanding the archetype. And it says, there is no fast or easy way of making a friend with Saturn. In many ways, the ancient art of alchemy was dedicated to this end, for the base material of alchemy, in which lay the possibility of gold, was called Saturn. And this base material, as well as having a concrete existence, was also considered to be the alchemist himself. Modern psychology, which is paralleling more and more the path of the alchemist, who seeks to make a friend of Saturn, although here he is called by other names. But if one is to persist, it is possible to extract the gold, and in the end, one may find, if the effort is made, that Saturn has a sense of humor, after all, when we have become subtle enough to understand his irony. And I love this piece because it represents our lives, I think. The pain and the joy that comes from it. It is quite ironic. Thank you, Linda. Next slide. Thank you. So Saturn in astrology is seen as being related to karma and lessons that offer punishment. I see Saturn partly as a giver of light. We cannot buy wisdom nor enlightenment. It comes with time, which Saturn is also known to be responsible for. Each of us has a huge potential despite our early life conditioning. There is value in pain, as this increases our capacity to become whole. And if we can see the restrictions which Saturn brings upon us with respect and maintain self-love, we ease our emotional path. Without pain, we would not move to discover the new delights in life. And this beautiful picture as well I found of Adam and Eve. And not Saturn, but Satan above, but that the energy of how we are dealing with life, the beauty, and then the hardships as well. Thank you, Linda. So Saturn, which I think maybe not everybody knows, but many do in astrology, that Saturn spends 2.5 years in each sign and 29.5 years to orbit the astrology chart. Saturn is the ruler of Capricorn, and Capricorn is the 10th astrological sign in the zodiac, originating from the constellation of Capricornus, the horned goat. Thank you, Linda. Okay, so the traits to cultivate, I think that I've learned looking at my Saturn and as I've aged through it and looking back on hindsight, is acceptance and understanding, patience, inner and outer, and allowing time to work through our problems so that we do not become frustrated. It is useful for us to cultivate the ability to see the alternative choices we are faced with in life circumstances as Saturn transits through our chart, as also as it transits, as well as our natal placement. We can expand our consciousness via knowledge and by asking ourselves questions. A few good questions that we can ask ourselves is, what is the problem and what would a solution look like? And what is the problem and what would a cure look like? So when we have problems, we can do this. And we can also ask, is there another way of doing this? Is there another way of seeing this? So instead of getting depressed about problems, we can ask good questions. And this is beautiful. This is Parahashna Yoganda. Sorry if I pronounced that slightly wrong. He basically said that astrology is the study of man's response to planetary stimuli. The stars have no conscious benevolence or animosity. They merely send forth positive and negative radiations of themselves. These do not help or harm humanity, but offer a lawful channel in the outward operation of cause-effect equilibriums, which each man has set into motion in the past. A child is born on that day and at that hour when the celestial rays are in mathematical harmony with the individual karma. His horoscope is a challenging portrait revealing the unalterable past and its probable future results. But the natal chart can be rightfully interpreted only by man of the intuitive wisdom. These are few. The message boldly blazoned across the heavens at the moment of birth is not meant to emphasize fate, the result of past good and evil, but to arouse man's will to escape from the universal thraldom. What he has done, he can undo. None other than himself was the instigator of the causes of whatever effects are now prevalent in his life. He can also overcome any limitations because he created it by his own actions in the first place, and because of he has spiritual resources which are not subject to planetary pressure. Thank you. That's from Outwitting the Stars, a chapter in the book of Autobiography of a Yogi. Thank you, Linda. So here goes. We've got Saturn in the first house, and it represents the physical body and personality and the way we relate to the environment. Persona, as described by Jung, how we present ourselves to the world over, and our mask, a cloak, so to speak. When we are unformed and in the process of becoming, where we are unformed and in the process of becoming, what we are likely to attract into our experience, which shapes and develops our consciousness and conditioned qualities. It can say that there is difficult birth being physical or psychological. So if you've got a first house Saturn, maybe you can relate to some of this or not. A difficult birth, physical or psychological, reluctance to expose who one is, a belief that it is costly to get involved with life, weakness being too much identification with how one is seen. Young ages usually are depressive, so we can cultivate balance so one does not only identify with the mask. One's will can be enforced, control, seriousness, defensive, attack first without fear of attack. Control can be expressed in subtle ways. They can be shy, stiff, awkward, and protection from being vulnerable, high in suspicion and low in confidence, isolation. There can be chronic ill health as a child, and withdrawal from the arena of life. Identifying with the mask, a wanting of freedom to be self and to be free of the need of being first, a needing to prove worth and fear of being hurt, dominated, turning anger inward. An unexpressed anger and frustration affects the body, and fear of the fight, an inner feeling of losing, desires not fulfilled, and does not ask for what is wanted, and thoughts of not being deserving. So we go on still in the first house. So we can find, it's about finding the inner richness of exploring one's own identity. Hard work and life can force them to work from their early years. They can also be expected to behave like adults too quickly. A high degree of self-discipline, feelings of being utterly responsible, and their sense of responsibility, feeling guilty about things that they should not be their concern. So during their childhood, they did not receive a lot of love from their surroundings, and happiness was something that elders usually frowned upon. They could have been taught to be limited, to not express themselves openly, and their self-confidence can be low. Their parents gave them ideals of systematic work, goal-orientated, and usually were too harsh concerning criticism and failures. There could have been bullying, which can make one reserved in expressing their identity in the outer world. And this person tends to accumulate much wisdom and experience from their early years, and that is the gold in this placement, which allows the person to then be able to help and teach others. Thank you, Linda. Okay, through the second house. Here we have material possessions, wealth, and needs and desires. Saturn here gives a person who is generally born to a poor family or who has had to quickly learn how to live on minimal resources. This situation creates a survivor, someone who starts from zero. Saturn is a limitative planet and adores hard work, serious approaches with slow steps. A lot of time and effort will be dedicated to build income and establish security. There will be trauma around financial difficulties, and this can equate to extreme seriousness around money and needs. This aspect can create people who overwork, even in those who have good aspects. Success comes slowly and normally late in life. When it does come, there is no going back. The person will not want to risk loss of wealth. Also, there may be forgetfulness to enjoy the money earned. And in extreme circumstances, it can create a reluctance to share resources which may not be visible to the person. We've got, in addition, Saturn may make one feel depression with regard to material matters, even if things are going well. It is important with this placement to enjoy and celebrate life, even in the small ways. Even with this placement, you must understand that even though you need to cooperate with it and work hard, we must not let one planet rule our roost. And that speaks for all of the natal placements, I think. We can empower ourselves by looking at aspects to Saturn. It is important we receive pleasure whilst building our security in life. Here, we need to make sure we consciously get out to smell the roses, so to speak. There you go. That's the second house. And then Saturn in Gemini in the third house. And what I'm going to have to do here is, because the writing's got a bit small for me, got it here. All right, so here we are dealing with communication skills, issues that we find where speech comes later than other children as an outer expression. The speech may be slow, or the child may be too shy to express thoughts. The mind may take more time to process information, even when the child is intelligent. There may be possibilities of speech defects, even when highly intelligent. This can make the child feel inferior. This can be remedied as we transcend and grow through our transits. This house is also about systems of thoughts, and in the long term can help create a more organized brain. Saturn here can temporarily affect the consistency of education. Saturn in this house makes the individual dedicate a lot of effort to the area of life represented by it. This person will maybe struggle with study and may need to spend more time at it than others, and may have a rather serious approach towards their desires. Being successful in study may become an important desire. Saturn here also gives endurance and patience. This can create a minimalist with regard to communication, and generally can be quite cautious and reserved in communication. And this aspect can be great for some types of work, especially where secrets need to be kept and confidentiality held. There may be issues with siblings, and relating may have no warmth with regard to communications, as its gloomy nature does not allow the flow of feelings. There can be repression and self-esteem issues and feelings of abandonment. There can be feelings and experience of feeling blocked and fears in communication. And there may be problems with travel and short trips which create a negative feeling towards travel. It is important to watch one's mood here, to watch out for melancholic thinking. There can be depression from childhood and teenage years, young years, and the way to deal with this is through speaking about feelings and gaining knowledge and socializing and communicating with others, working on any shyness that exists within you. Working with the hands and creating that which brings joy is helpful here, and taking opportunities to speak up when asked. Speaking engagements and having a say in group settings may help on subjects that inspire your mind. There you go. Thank you. Okay, Saturn for the fourth house. This is my placement, and when I thought about this, it really meant a lot to me, the fourth house, because I think we all find that with our own placement, that we get quite attached to our own placements. So Saturn in the 4th house of Cancer, or Cancer, so to speak. This is a difficult natal placement. The 4th house is traditionally ruled by Cancer and the Moon, and Saturn's cold presence adversely affects all emotional areas connected with the home, family, and childhood. This placement often shows a dysfunctional family, and even if Saturn has good aspects, it can bring coldness in family affairs. The parents might be older, conservative, and might also be a burden because they need to be looked after. There can be money struggles, and Saturn in the 4th house generally brings an unhappy childhood and can cripple emotional development. This placement is to do with the domestic situation and emotional stability. And as Cancer and the Moon are to do with mother and the emotions and nurture. This can affect adulthood in detrimental ways, and this means that the child in adulthood will be forced by Saturn placement to create the missed components in order to feel at peace in life. Another problem here can be codependency on others despite untoward treatment received. One has to work on being in a balance and find what they want for themselves internally. Inner security is the lesson here, and not to seek outside oneself. This is indeed gold, as it forces individuation and self-sufficiency. One can then develop one's own family in such a way that codependency is not a factor. It takes awareness and wisdom to see things fully. Pain in life often comes through dependency on others, so it is indeed a great lesson once integrated and fully understood. Inner love and tenderness is the ultimate, and full love and acceptance of our inner child, a feat that many will never get to experience. In integrating this placement and the lessons, we have much to offer the world, as this is something we can teach others and that also will bring inner peace. To acknowledge our own feeling nature and self-nurture. If we consider the mirror effect, that we think of self, what we think of self and feel about self, we will often receive from others. The inner work is to understand that self-nurture and self-love is imperative in this house, and we can release blame and then come to peace. Family can be experiences over-restrictive, and the person will definitely consider escaping this life direction. Here, it influences the way one sees family, and even if the family does love, they can feel the opposite, tendencies of loneliness as a child and being misunderstood, and this sometimes can be caused by large difference in age between him and his parents, as an example. Thank you, Linda. Okay, Saturn in the 5th house of Leo, and here is the presence in this house of joy, or will restrain from the amusements of life. This can give a rather serious approach to life. And Saturn is not the best placement to have in the house of pleasure. This placement can cause shyness. This may create a very serious character concerning activities that are meant to be enjoyable. Fun and joy have been frowned upon by parents who might have looked at play and laughter and having fun as a sin. One may have a hard time being spontaneous, a reaction to have structured patterns. And also, it is also important to learn to relax and try to enjoy ourselves, even when it seems to be difficult to adapt to such situations. They may prefer a solidarity in entertainment. A person with Saturn in the 5th house tends not to date a lot. They might look for stability, views on dating, and may be conservative. As the 5th house is responsible for children, Saturn's presence tends to obstruct having them in this house. They might not want children. Saturn can create a conscious choice of not procreating. And people with this placement might reconsider their stance towards having children. They like having a routine, programming and planning their future, and this can be a way to feel joy for them. Solitary hobbies. This placement can give a lot of wisdom due to having to be serious from an early age. They can excel as professionals with natal Saturn connected to the 10th or the 6th house. They may have been little loved during childhood. There may have been little love during childhood, and they may feel unappreciated. This teaches children to show little love and affection towards others. Relationships are not made public. Any hobbies with others need to have practical purposes in order to be enjoyed. Giving or receiving gifts are not held as valuable in this house. To soften being overly critical, try to find situations where one can relax and feel joy. Find ways to make life easy, that you can spend less time worrying. One can raise their self-confidence through group activities instead of keeping separate. Here, you may have the ability to create something, a work of art that will survive time. And here, one can be great builders if Saturn has positive aspects. Creations might be long-standing. Do not be afraid to play. And when others offer and show love, we can reflect that back to others. There you go. Thank you, Linda. Okay, Saturn in the 6th house or Virgo. The 6th house includes one's work, personal efforts, and offering our service to others. Saturn here gives demanding work surroundings. Spending time with work is a conscious decision, and the work can be demanding, a very serious approach to professional affairs, and a disallowance of experimenting. Difficult aspects can mean difficulties in reaching goals and slow growth and delays. Feeling of being paid less than one is really deserved, and health issues can often be psychosomatic in this house. Work difficulties and health issues can strike at the same time, and health issues can often be psychosomatic. Work can be lifelong, and the person can choose not to retire out of wanting to be of service. Routines, healthcare, and workers commonly have Saturn among other planets in the 6th house. Saturn here may complicate issues that concern career, and this can also give a lot of stability. Strong work ethics, dedication to what they do, and being responsible and volunteering. Saturn in the 6th rules animals. May have had a cold attitude towards animals and dogs and cats, etc. Animals are known here as a solution to work and health problems with Saturn in the 6th, as this can soften our nature. Animals can offer a lot of love and increase our dopamine levels, or the oxytocin, which it's healthy for us. There are ideas about not getting married before the first Saturn return, as Saturn will move into the 7th house, which can create issues in relationships for a few years. And this period can also be stressful as to health, as emotions and relationships go hand in hand. And this can create health issues. Cortisol levels are responsible for affecting our immune system. And I can see how having a little animal can calm people down. Not all people, but some people. This is where my solar return has landed this year in the 6th house. And having a little dog has actually crossed my mind to calm me down. There you go, Linda. Thank you. Okay, Saturn in the 7th house of Libra. Now this can create complications in partnership matters, but we can also handle them well, which leads to relationship with stability. Here, one can question themselves if they want marriage or stability. This is a sign, the sign in which it resides is a factor. In Saturn in Capricorn, Aquarius or Libra operate well, and not so well in Cancer, Leo or Aries, as traits can be debilitated. Marriage may come as they mature, being in their later years. Age difference must be thought about fully, generational, and for the sake of this matter of the heart and well-being. Love is not enough in many cases in relationships. It takes more than love for relationships to work. If one partners with somebody older, they need to be conscious of the reality. Saturn here indicates a wanting of stability. If the native starts realizing in the future mistakes and wants to exit to the bond, the partner will definitely impose all types of pressure for that not to happen. aspects need to be looked at carefully on all Saturn placements. We need to view the harsh aspects and the beneficial ones to get the whole picture. Serious relationships can take up quite a chunk of our life, and it is worth the time and effort to explore the reality of relationships and the meaning of them to us. For business relationships, this placement can give relationships that last long. The connections may be very professional, and this may be very disciplined and bring security. Saturn in the seven is looking for security and long-term security, and this requires commitment and dedication to function at its best. Saturn rewards those for hard work. Look at your needs and lay your cards on the table and understand what you really want. This is about partnership. We are all dealing with Libra in the 7th house here. Thank you, Linda. Okay, so Saturn in the 8th house of Scorpio. This house rules sex, money, death, and taxes, and transformation, of course. Here lays the sex of unification, the mystical experience between two souls. And Saturn makes the person selective of partners, cautious regarding intimate relationships. Saturn here can indicate sexual encounters inside stable relationships and can bring a lot of sex. Saturn here can create difficulty with loans, banks, and others' money. Money can be raised without having a sense of owning money. It's important to create one's own power. This can also create financial burdens, so it's better not to create debts towards others, as this can cause suffering. Marriage partners can also create financial burdens, and this is great for those who work in banks as organized and great with calculations. They can be trusted in their ability to keep expenses down and maximize income. This can mean a lot of long life, but the experience of death of other people. And this can also create fear, but we learn a lot through our losses. This can cause seriousness and cause one to mature. And here we can also have transformations, and Saturn is rather a karmic teacher. The placement can teach us to let go in order to experience rebirth, and acceptance is a good word for this placement to ride it. Surrender is important in life, and it is a powerful thing when we know we can have and have done so, when we have surrendered, and we can actually do that. Thank you, Linda. Okay, thank you, Linda. So Saturn in the 9th house of Sagittarius. So here we have, this placement suggests a person who is born to a traditional family who may have a very narrow perception of religion and education. And this can be pushy for a child, forcing a child to accept views. There can be rejection of religion and education in the individual and heavy disappointment about how they were taught. Saturn here creates a need to break those patterns that were imposed upon them. And Saturn here will help break patterns that were imposed upon them, and the person will investigate to find alternative explanations to experience higher meanings and philosophy. This placement can block higher education whilst young, and they can be repelled by authority and others' views. Education and a search for truth may come in later years after the Saturn return. It benefits to look at aspects as here one can be dogmatic if ill aspected. Clearly we can transform and transcend. Deep traumas connected with our early years can affect us badly. With good aspects, they can be rewarding journeys during the native's old age. By the time he has a lot more ready to blend in with different cultures, traditions, and surroundings. So after the Saturn return, people with this placement need to experience life over time to broaden their horizons. And Saturn equals time, among other things, and time is life. This Saturn placement here allows for the expansion, and we need to make an effort. And there can be slow progress, as nothing can be done at the speed of light. with Saturn, where Saturn is present. And this can be restrictive with regard to the development of higher ideals, and this is not normally involved with problems of the body or material surroundings in this placement. The battle is often one of the mind here, and the walls are often inner. And when we understand this, when we understand that the battle is within the mind, we can begin to dismantle our issues. Okay, thank you, Linda. Okay, so here, Saturn in the 10th house of Capricorn, and here it is the natural ruler of Capricorn. Saturn, high in the heavens, is better than below, and Saturn correlates to seriousness here. It requires a devoted approach to career matters. Rewards come through efforts and dedication. Success generally comes in the second part of life, and early years can be very stressful. This person's occupation is highlighted here. The 10th house rules father, and Saturn here can indicate a rather strict nature. The dominant parent may be absent due to work, or there may be a big age difference. There can be a lot of pressure from the parent in expectations, which create a lot of stress. Dependent on aspects, there can be abuse, including verbal and psychological, patterns of workaholism, pressure to make dreams reality. This is also to do with how a system needs to work in order to be productive. In business, they may rule in a tyrannical style. This house rules fame, but this does not mean they always shine in the eyes of the masses. Fame can come from negative as well as positive acts. Promotion is promotion, and it can be good or bad. Saturn here is known for responsibility. Work here is not a game nor taken lightheartedly, as this is how the person identifies itself with self. This person will often be their own boss, independent of others, and they may not be wanting to be ruled at work, and may be involved in government positions. Saturn here may also indicate a career in politics and campaigns, and this placement may also show dealings with the difficult matters of business, the firing and hiring of people, control and pressure through position. Efforts here reap success, but discipline is required. If something is not done correctly from the beginning, if something is done correctly from the beginning, then it clearly saves time. Thank you, Linda. Okay, Saturn in the 11th house of Aquarius. Here we have friendships are important here to the person, and this person will be careful about them. This person may have problems integrating with groups of people. It can also help make us make careful choices with regard to friends. And this placement allows for long-lasting relations with friends and groups. That, with regard to friends, this placement allows for long-lasting friendships with groups that to develop and mature as they develop and mature. Stability and support, shelter and a haven. Saturn can bring quite a lot of friends who are older. A grandparent may have been a best friend when younger. We may always see aspects with Saturn. And then it may bring loneliness here. And we may not trust friends and may avoid group gatherings and organizations. We also may experience loneliness and find comfort in it sometimes as well. Large groups of people can feel suffocating, and they may build an inner barrier towards such kind of events. We need to consider aspects as difficult ones can indicate trauma with friends in childhood. And there can also be pressures and responsibilities with regard to friends which make situations unpleasant. Here, the person prefers few and trusted for real friendships. They maintain a distance, and friendships can come slowly. The 11th house is also about goals and dreams and wealth. And Saturn here can delay them until the second part of one's life. Aspects here are always important to view. It's also important to view the overall picture. And here it can bring wealth in later years. This is also a placement of planning and organizing groups of people. And Saturn gives strategic thinking and an understanding of groups and structures. And Saturn here can mean progress is slow in building a structure. Larger structures need time to be built in order to withstand time. We can boost Saturn here and the positive traits here by caring about older people around us. Giving love where others overlook it makes life more pleasant for others. And here the gifts are returned and can be long-lasting. So that's Saturn in Aquarius or in the 11th house. Thank you, Linda. Okay, Saturn in the 12th house or Pisces. So this is a difficult placement as the house of fears and restriction can lead to isolation and depression. Saturn, as is generally known for being cold and restrictive in its energy, and this can cause one to feel limited, frequently afraid to dream, which can in turn leads to despair and melancholy. And this can keep the individual away from achieving desires and wishes. Birth may have been difficult or traumatic, and one may subconsciously isolate from the world in order to recreate the more secure surroundings of being in the womb. Good aspects to Saturn may help relieve the difficulties of this placement. This person may enjoy being alone and function better in isolation, like hermits or monks, an urge to be away from people and the masses. This person may choose work that will allow seclusion, caring for the elderly, etc., either at home or in hospitals. This placement may also take up a lot of time for caring for the elderly, family members. There can be unconscious worries and guilt. They may feel responsible about things that they may not need to feel responsible for and blame themselves for things that are nothing to do with them. So that's something to watch out for. Anxiety and melancholy, difficulty sharing and talking to others regarding their own depths. In order not to suffer, we need to open up to others so we can lose that part of ourselves. There can be disappointments through hidden enemies, and one may have been mistreated by grandparents. There can be burdens concerning how the time is and what to do with it, and this can be very uncomfortable. The way through this placement is to stop taking life so seriously. Look at your fears and look at the reality and how you want to live your life. Cultivate gratitude and do things that bring peace and enjoyment, even if it is in seclusion. And we can choose how we spend our time and moods to a degree, and we need to remember that. Thanks, Linda. Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to have a sip of water here. And I do know the evolutionary school that I'm getting more into understanding from the evolutionary aspect, which is very important to me as I'm studying. So it's one of the best systems that I've come across, and I'm glad that I'm delving into it deeper and deeper as I get work on my own chart as well. So here, this is from the Evolutionary website, and it says here, evolution from the School of Evolutionary Astrology. So it says, the simplest way to validate the natural law of evolution is based on the universal human experience in which all of us know that we are in a continuous state of becoming. This is not a function of belief or needing to believe, it is simply a fact. Of course, any of us can observe the natural law of evolution in countless ways as applied to the totality of creation. We can observe it relative to the evolution of human life form. We can observe it in the life of plants and animals. We can observe it through the fundamental changes over great lengths of time to the Earth itself as an evolving planet. We can observe it through our telescopes pointed out to the universes. We can observe it even at a molecular level of life. Evolution simply comes down to and means the changing of form, the changing of structure, the changing of energy, and the change of anything. The very word change implies evolution. Evolution is always preceded by another natural law called involution, which what this means is that for a change of the evolution to occur relative to some structure, form, energy, pattern, dynamics, etc., it is always preceded by an involution, which simply means the ending or destruction of something that pre-exists. That which pre-exists when evolution or change becomes necessary implies and means that some pre-existing something, a dynamic structure and so on, is promoting a state of stagnation or non-growth in all forms of life, in anything that exists as a phenomena within the totality of creation. There exists another natural law called survival. When this natural law is ignited or stimulated, for whatever reasons, it will always cause the natural law of involution, leading to evolution, to occur, so that the ongoing survival of life form, structure, and so on can occur. Thank you, Linda. Okay, continued. The natural laws of evolution and involution have two ways of manifesting. One way manifests as a slow, progressive, non-catalytic process of change. Darwin called this the natural law of uniformity. And the other way, of course, is cataclysmic change, in which the very nature of the process of involution leads to evolution is intense and very abrupt. This is a very different than the evolution reflected in the natural law of uniformity, which allows for a gradual change over time. Cataclysmic evolution creates a sudden change that is immediate and stark. Again, these two natural ways of evolution are observable by anyone as facts that do not require any belief at all. The natural law of evolution and involution correlates to astrologically to Pluto. I love Pluto. I love the work of Pluto. So there we got it. And my favorite person in the world right now is Jung, on top of my evolutionary astrology. And it says that which we do not bring to consciousness appears in our lives as fate. And that comes back to Saturn for me and what we've just gone through, that the more we look at ourselves like we're doing now in this this Zoom meeting, that basically we are looking at in order to evolve, and we're becoming conscious, which is a really beautiful thing. It's a beautiful gift we have, astrology. Thank you, Linda. Thank you. There you go. So there you go.
Thank you so much, Penelope. That was fantastic. Thank you. So do we have any comments from our audience or any questions?
Yeah, I would be fascinated to know if anybody's got a fourth house Saturn. I've had a really, you know, I've had a very, really, what I've read about it really correlates to my own life. It's been, you know, very tricky, lonely, and now I'm beginning to, you know, basically I've been sent inward to be quite individuated, and sometimes I think I'm a bit over individuated in my personality, which makes it hard to make friendships. But it's coming now in my life through astrology and meeting people of like-minded. I'm beginning to build some solid friendships in my life and remove that loneliness that I felt for most of my life. So, is there any questions there?
Hi, Penelope.
Hi.
My question is, or maybe a bit of a comment. Hi.
Hi.
That these can also be resonant with the corresponding planet that rules that house, like say Saturn in the first. That description can also be resonant if you have Saturn-Mars aspects.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not great on the aspects now. I've got a lot to learn on aspects myself, and as I'm being taught, you know, as I do my lessons of evolutionary astrology, that's something that I'm learning as well and picking up on. But I think that for me, I see it more, from what I'm seeing, I see, you know, that I'm seeing it more to be the house. And when I'm looking at my own chart, I'm noticing that the house seems to be bouncing back to me a lot more than the sign, particularly with the fourth house Saturn that I have. But I think I think you know quite a lot more maybe than me, Wanda, on astrology. I think you've been around longer in it. But do you want to tell me about the Mars thing to educate me a bit, maybe?
Well, I definitely was. I don't have a major Saturn Mars aspect. Excuse me, aspect, but I really related to the Saturn in the third, or Gemini. Now I don't have either one of those, but I have Saturn conjunct my Mercury.
Oh, you do have Saturn conjunct your Mercury?
Yes.
And where do you have that? In what house?
In the 7th.
And when the 7th, okay, it's fascinating. Yeah. So mine is conjunct Chiron on my IC, and it's been a crazy life, but it's just beautiful to see that, you know, the truth of the way my life's played out, and when I look and that with others as well, how theirs is playing out in their lives. But I do feel that there's a lot of gold in understanding Saturn, that I'm finding that for myself. You know, that it's making me be a bit more, it's making me more patient and understand that, you know, because it's time. You can't, you know, I want all of my North Node aspects to be activated now. And I'm across that I'm still trying to step into my North Node, and that there are parts of it that I've not fulfilled, you know, after my Chiron return, that, you know, I know that I've got to, you know, take a step back and know that that will be activated at the right time, so to speak. Okay.
Yes, definitely agree. Definitely agree with that.
Thank you, Wanda. Thank you.
Okay, any final questions?
This is Patrice. Thank you, Penelope. That was wonderful.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's kind of more of a statement than a question. I just wanted to say I really appreciate your quotes at the beginning on
Alice Bailey.
Saturn. Yeah, that, you know, looking at Saturn as an alchemist, because and extracting the golds, what I wrote down, and then Saturn having a sense of humor. I have a 10th house sun, so that's, you know, Capricornian, and I've worked with, you know, I've had to make friends with Saturn, and like us all, and I really appreciate, I think I look at Capricorn Saturn energy as a gatekeeper, you know, and I think you bring that out with the word, you know, alchemy in some of the quotes, and so I'm really appreciative of that, because it really is a strong, beautiful energy, and good. So your awareness and, you know, through this is really helping, I think, to, you know, open us up to that mediumship, that alchemy. And it's a beautiful energy.
So what I was doing was, I mean, through my reading up on it, and I've got a way to go on astrology, but through my reading up on it, and I had Saturn go over my AC at the end of 2015, and my life literally fell to bits. And I lost a lot of weight, and I'm trying to put it back on a few years later. I had, you know, a business that sort of went to bits as well. So it was and now I'm going through my first, at the end of my first house, I've come into myself, and now I've got more of an understanding of my own identity. And you know, it's beautiful that I know this now, that we don't need to suffer the Saturn transits if we know what's going on, and to know there's gold in them softens the energy, I think.
Yeah, two other quick comments is that, you know, I noticed because you are a fourth house Saturn, you know, you have the polarity right there, the Capricorn and the Moon. So as those come together for you, you know, Cancerian energy with the, you know, maturation of the wise eldership archetype. I think that's beautiful. And the last comment I'd like to say is the work on the nodes, of the planetary nodes. I think it's real significant on a collective level with Pluto and Saturn, and I can't remember the third. They have their north node in the sign of Cancer, and the south node, those planetary nodes. So that might be something you might want to look at. I know Mark Jones is doing quite a bit of work on that to kind of integrate that energy, because it's big right now collectively for us. With all having the north node in Cancer. Pluto North Node in Cancer and the South Node. So that's something to consider too.
And I think it's a wonderful thing, like how much I learned through speaking to other people, like, you know, like you've just brought up that I've never thought of that before in looking at my own chart, that the 4th house and the 10th. So that's something else I can explore. It's a beautiful thing we learn through each other. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Okay, so that brings us to the end of your meeting, Penelope. Thank you so much for your presentation on Saturn through the houses. And
Thank
we
you.
look forward to seeing you again in the future. Would you all
Thank
please
you very much.
thank Penelope Ryder, everyone?
Thank you. Thank you so much, Linda.
Thank you.
Thank you, Penelope. That was wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you, Penelope.
Thank you. Thank you, Linda.
Thanks, Penelope. That was great.
Thank you.